Hello and welcome to this short video. This is dedicated primarily to my friends and colleagues in the world of teaching English. And I just want to say up front that this video comes after teaching Hamlet 24 times and a lot of it badly, looking back. I don't know if badly is the right word, but maybe if you're a teacher, you feel like you want to go back to your first classes that you taught. And like me, you want to just say, geez, I'm sorry. I was operating on caffeine and hope at the time. But yeah, I think just honest conversations about challenges teaching really difficult texts. Those conversations are important. And I'd just like to offer some thoughts. In no way am I saying that I do all these things well. These are some things I've learned to do and not to do. So it's 5 tips for teachers teaching Hamlet. First, if you're teaching this to high school students, there's a really good chance that to high school students, this is just the next book you're teaching them. They might have a sense that it's important. They know it's by Shakespeare and Shakespeare is hard. But I think if you're an English teacher, you know the weight on your shoulders when you teach something like Hamlet. And that's probably only the case for you, that perhaps approaching it as a story with people who have interesting problems rather than a sort of museum piece that we know every actor has thought about and every director has thought about and every playwright has thought about and every literary critic has thought about. Rather than that, deal with the problems of the characters and the questions that come up. But I think I used to make this mistake a lot. I think it's good for students to see my enthusiasm about great books that I love to teach. I try not to tell them how great these books are, sort of, prescriptively, because that creates a sort of set of expectations that, geez, well, why don't I think it's great? Or if I don't understand it, does that mean I'm stupid? I don't understand it. So maybe just, if you're enthusiastic, that's great. But there shouldn't be this sense that like we now must bow at the altar of Shakespeare and of Hamlet. It's a play written by a person and it has people in it. And I think just launching into the play that way is probably the most healthy for everybody. This is the honest part of this that I couldn't recommend more strongly. I would recommend this if you're a newer teacher and you're in your faculty room and you're maybe surrounded by people who really know the play well because they've taught it so many times. And that can be, it's sort of like the teacher version of Harold Bloom's Anxiety of Influence, right? I would also say that if you've taught it for a long time and you have a sort of way of doing it and a way of thinking about it and a way of reading it, I think it's really important to constantly challenge our thoughts about great books. And I think it's real easy to get lazy if you're an experienced teacher. I think it just is. I think it's easy to just call up your slides from the previous 10 years. You have the book that's annotated, you have the assessment at the end, and it can be easy to take a mental break. And I think I believe strongly that criticism has a place even in the high school classroom. Now, what I would suggest doing if you've never taught the play before or are looking to sort of reanimate your teaching of the play, spend some time in the summer actually sitting with the primary text first. I think going to secondary material first means that your teaching will be a parroting of other people's thoughts. But I think if you read deeply the play and you write down your questions and you write down things you want answered and you write down your observations, not necessarily because you're going to teach it that way, but just you're the human being interacting with the play, I think that can ground you in your own personal experience. And then when you go to read criticism, the primary foundation of your experience of the play is yours, not Asimov's or somebody else. The first secondary text that I think is really helpful when reading Shakespeare, whether you're teaching Shakespeare or you just want a deeper appreciation of Shakespeare, is Isaac Asimov's Guide to Shakespeare. It's a scene-by-scene commentary of each play. And Asimov wasn't a Shakespeare scholar. He just grew up with his father reading Shakespeare to him. And this is a beautiful book this is a lot of work. It's probably a 40-page chapter on Hamlet. And I would just really recommend having your notes on the primary text, scene by scene, your questions, your problems, your crises, your whatever. And then start adding things Asimov teaches you to your notes. I find Asimov good for nuts and bolts. He'll clarify, politics and history, relationships. Not so much a deep dive in terms of commentary, although that's there. I think Asimov's really great for the high school teacher, to be honest. And then my favorite modern critic of Shakespeare is Marjorie Garber. She teaches at Harvard. You may have heard of it. It's in Cambridge, Mass. And her book, Shakespeare After All, is awesome. I don't think her Hamlet lectures on YouTube, but she has a sort of an adult education class, and it has tons of lectures that are publicly available. And she's really good. I find her readable. I find her questions to be good. And I would just say here that this to me is the real reason to read critics. The two reasons. One, they remind us of what loving a text can look like. And two, so if you're bored after teaching The Scarlet Letter or The Great Gatsby or Death of a Salesman or Oedipus or Hamlet or whatever, or Beloved, because you've done it so many times, read great criticism. Not necessarily to steal ideas, although that might happen. Not necessarily to steal writing prompts, because that certainly can happen. But just to be around, I can't go to Harvard and hang out with Marjorie Garber. I can't hang out with Asimov because he's, dead. I can't hang out with Harold Bloom because he's dead. I can't hang out with Harold Goddard because he's dead. However, we can hang out with them, and we can be influenced by their enthusiasm by reading them. And I think that's the big thing. So I would say if you want to reanimate your teaching of Shakespeare, or really any book, but of say Hamlet, spend some serious time over the summer. This also will help you if you're doing this on the beach. It'll help clear out the area around you on the beach because people will be suspicious of you. But seriously, though, do a deep dive back into the primary text first. And then I would take these two texts and then any other ones. Don't go overboard. I think it should be at least 50-50 primary to secondary, if not more on the primary source end. But honoring both's good, and I think you'll have a fuller appreciation. And if you're teaching high school kids and they have a list of, questions and problems about the play, there's a really good chance that Asimov and Garber, not so much of have provided answers for you, but they have a lot of questions too. And you can kind of get used to a pattern of problems and questions when you read criticism. Anyway, I really recommend this for both new teachers to Hamlet and even veteran teachers. Third, and this obviously depends on where you teach. Maybe you're handed a curriculum and you don't have wiggle room, and that's your circumstance. I definitely think it's good to have a plan. I think with any book, I always like to know what the assessment at the end is, because that helps me teach it. If I'm doing a creative writing assessment, I'm going to stage classrooms in a particular way. And if I'm doing a research paper, I'm going to stage the class experience in a certain way. I would have a plan and a schedule, but be open to changing that plan, because you don't know what your classes are going to think. You don't know what they're going to react to. You don't know what they're going to be interested in or have problems with. So I think that's really, really important. I do, as I'll mention later, an acting project. I'm an actor, and I have a lot of former students who are studying theater. So after Christmas, I always tell my students, I can't open presents until all my Shakespearean characters are dead. So we kill off Hamlet and his friends, spoiler. We have Christmas, and then the 2 weeks back after April break, when the college kids are home, we workshop scenes, and kids that don't normally act in my English class have to learn lines and block and stage. And they write a paper about it, and it's great. It's one of my favorite times of the year because it just really makes Shakespeare come alive for my students. But I've done other things. I like COVID last year, I had to get creative. So yeah, have a plan. I wouldn't be overly loosey-goosey, but also, as you always do, read the room. Fourth, so this again might not be up to you. My main goal when teaching Hamlet is that kids gain an appreciation for William Shakespeare and for theater, and for everything Shakespeare and theater can mean, for the way theater can address our own lives. And so it can be a mirror, right? But it also can be a window into who I would argue as the most brilliant literary character ever created, the person who never accepts trite answers, who struggles living in the world he's been born in, who struggles with what he's being made to do. And I just think he's never boring. He's endlessly interesting. And I would love my students to approach that with awe and wonder. So if that's the case, I would focus on frequent writing, short writing bursts, workshopping out loud in class, workshopping different ways to read lines, different ways to enact scenes, and then having the class really be about what the students notice and what the students are wondering about. I'm interested in an infinite list of things with a book like this. And if you're a teacher, I know you are too. And maybe you went to college and grad school and did it in a certain way. And I just want to say here, that's really important and has nothing to do with what we do in the classroom in terms of what our students need to experience. I really believe that strongly. Ours is a job where we really can get married to nostalgia really quickly. And we can think that good teaching is what we experienced in college and graduate school. If you're a high school teacher, just remember, you're not teaching college and graduate school. So you might have to reinvent what experiencing Hamlet is for your students. And there's a really good chance that if you started teaching in 1997, like I did, that was, experiencing Shakespeare with those students was one way, and almost every year it evolves. After 9/11, it changed. After I had kids, it changed. After my kids were a certain age, it changed. After I lost my father, it changed. After COVID, it's changed. So I don't know. I have no interest personally in giving nitpicky quizzes and tests on something like Hamlet. I think there's plenty to write about, and I think writing about Hamlet is hard enough that I don't need them to know that Gertrude is the name of Hamlet's mother, and like that's really the important thing, or that they're an Elsinore, or I have no interest in that because I think it mutes love and appreciation. And I think you get all those things. I think kids will pay attention to details if they're engaged. I think you get your cake and eat it too, to be honest. So this is just my pitch. Just think about it. And then it's a real gift to tell your students that you don't know something. As I've said, I think along with a few other texts, I know this text better than any other book. And I feel like I have more questions about it now than I did when I taught it for the first time, when I came in with my notes and I felt very confident at 25 or 24. Maybe you're the same. Maybe that's what a classic is, regardless of whether it's something written now or a long time ago, that it engenders more questions as time goes on because it's sort of infinitely interesting and complex. I think usually people read Hamlet when they're a little older in high school. Like I can't imagine giving this to a 14-year-old, but I know it can be done. I think it's important to engage this book on its face, and Hamlet is wrestling with what it means to be a human being. And I think as teachers, we know if there's a test or if there's a paper, and if the kids know in class there's a test, a quiz, a paper, they want to make every book a literary analysis assignment. So they're looking for thesis statements within books. And I think more than any other work of at least English literature, Hamlet defies a sort of formula. It defies a strategy. It defies predictability. He's incredibly unpredictable and mysterious and infinitely deep. So I think if a kid says, why do you think Hamlet doesn't kill Claudius right away? Or if a kid says, geez, how old is he? Is he 30 like the gravedigger says, but he's in college? Why doesn't Hamlet have more friends? Why does Ophelia automatically obey her father? Rather than just presume there's an answer to this, I honor his name was, I think it was John Barton. He helped start the Royal Shakespeare Company. He would always tell actors, if you're tempted to sort of search for an objective answer, instead play the tension between answers. So what that means in a classroom is, I would argue, like the why does Hamlet delay thing. Talk about why that's a question. Talk about, could you kill somebody? I mean, what does it take to actually, hold a dagger and end someone's life? Like, what kind of person could do that easily, right? Like, wrestle with the questions. And I think you'll have a more authentic Hamlet experience. But I feel that there's very little that I know. I feel like this, like a lot of human experiences, frankly, I think one of the reasons this play is great is that it defies categorization and it defies easy answers to life's biggest problems. And I think a lot of life is us sort of on a sort of figurative quicksand, that life isn't a thesis paper and neither is this play. And that's why it's really true to life. So these are just some suggestions. I don't know if this is helpful. I'd love to hear your comments, particularly if you're teaching Hamlet. And if there's anything else you would suggest, I would love to hear that. So thank you very much and good luck with your teaching.